Well, good afternoon. My name is Martin Vinette. I just finished a master's degree in sociology at Université du Québec à Montréal. And the following demonstration presents the conclusion I've reached during my master's thesis. So the title is written there, Representations of the Algerian War from an Intimate Enemy to an Invisible One. The conflict currently known as the Algerian War was a series of guerrilla attacks in a French colony located on the southern shore of the Mediterranean Sea. Conquered since 1830, the Algeria became one of the most prolific territories of the French Empire. Based on a system where the gain of one is depending on the loss of the other, the colony of Algeria counts two major groups, the indigènes, local population, and the Pieds-Noirs, French colonizers. Though the colonizer relation broke apart on May 8, 1945, at the French Liberation. So in Sétif, the indigènes started a protest claiming their independence, ending with the violent edge recalled as the Sétif massacre. Afterwards, it seems the table was set for an upcoming uprising of the Algerian colony. 9 years later, on November 1st, 1954, a group of activists, self-called FLN, National Liberation Front, coordinated bombings all around the colony. As an immediate reaction, the French army was deployed in Algeria, of course. Nonetheless, the conflict lasted another 8 years. In the end, the France lost its wealthiest colony, a part of their international reputation, and also made change in its political system. For the Algerian people, gaining their independence was costly. According to the historian Benjamin Stora, around 500,000 Algerians died during the conflict. And soon after, the new political regime became a dictatorship. As a consequence of the war, the French received a massive immigration from the Pieds-Noirs, say around 1 million persons, who wanted to flee the conflict and get back to the motherland. During the 1960s and 1970s, former colonized Algerians will do the same. But the arrival of those two groups created, of course, tensions. Consequently, the government created suburbs, called in French banlieue, for those two groups, for the second group of immigration, not for the first one. From that moment until now, those ghettos, we have to call them ghettos, became powder kegs. In parallel, 4 laws of amnesties were applied by French presidents from 1966 to 1982. By those laws, most of the crimes the French army and the Pieds-Noirs have committed were erased. Well, it seems the memory goes on in the same way, from history books to the cinema. The Algerian War was recalled publicly as the Algiers events. That's until the French National Assembly Parliament recognizes officially the existence of the Algerian War in 1999. So you see the gap of about 39 years. Afterwards, the treatment of this memory took a brand new turn. Though testimonies, debates, documentaries, and films kept talking about that conflict. Within 4 years, from 2004 to 2007, 11 films focusing on the Algerian War were produced. We have to go back immediately to the years following the end of the conflict to reach a similar number of productions, 10 from 1962 to 1964. As the memory of the conflict is gaining a new attention through the field of French cinema, questions are emerging. First of all, is it possible to examine an historical moment such as the Algerian War, I mean, not just Algerian, through the cinema? Then, can we read it socially, through a specific body of films? Afterwards, what are the representations of the Algerian War? And finally, are those films carrying a coherent discourse about the otherness and the selfness? No. As my conference will seek answers from the recent French cinematography, and as time is limited, I will introduce you to only one of the movies I've previously studied. Then I will present the methodology that I've used, and finally, from the movie Intimate Enemies, I will uncover and analyze different representations of the Algerian War. By the way, on those slides, you see extracts of Intimate Enemies, which you'll see film extracts in a few minutes. L'ennemi intime, or Intimate Enemies in English, stands in a position between a military-type movie and the reflections about the consequences of a harsh war. Based on the testimonies of Algerian war veterans, it depicts the story of a military section posted next to a cliff in the Atlas Mountains. Their mission is mostly about patrolling the area and, of course, cut the grass of the enemy, the Felagas. The plot focuses on Lieutenant Terrien, the new leader of the group. Hoping a more pacific issue for the conflict, unlike his second officer, who is a veteran of the Indochina War, so just before Vietnam War, Terrien begins to change his mind. At the beginning, he's against torturing prisoners, but he progressively begins practicing it by himself. After the massacre of a small village by the Felagas, he finds a young boy named Amar and shelters him. Their relation becomes a strong bond, but the young boy is torn between his former life and the one offered by the army. Then he flees. At the very end of the movie, and be careful, there are spoilers for that. So Amar comes back with his new friends, Felagas, and kills Terrien. To analyze the film, I'll need two complementary methodological sources. First, I'll refer to the studies of Pierre Sorlin, exemplified in Sociologie du cinéma. Thereafter, I will use the concept of representation as developed by Stuart Hall in Representation, Cultural Representations, and Signifying Practices. The methodologies shown by Pierre Sorlin help us to clarify how it is possible to examine an historical moment throughout the cinema. Though according to Sorlin, movies could be studied as witnesses of a past era. With their testimonies, it is then possible to understand more precisely a specific moment of the history. And as the film seems to be a staging of the society, Sorlin affirms that studying its construction will be the way to identify which point of views are transposed from the creator to the film itself. Sorlin's methodology emerged in two important fields: the process of selecting a specific body of films and the method to analyze it. To select a group of movie, and I'll make it really short, Sorlin uses two standards: the popularity of a film and its media attraction. According to the films that have been available for my research, the choice was very limited, among 11 films within 4 years. So let's say it was actually within a decade. It was very limited. So I decided to focus on 4 movies who share the most similarities. So just to name it, there is La Trahison, The Betrayal, Mon Colonel, My Colonel, and Les Aiguilles Rouges. But I prefer to focus on L'ennemi intime, The Intimate Enemies. Then, in order to analyze a selected group of films, Sorlin used a 3-steps approach. But for the purpose of the conference, I'll focus only on the first of those 3 steps. So the first step is an exploration based on only one film, where we have to examine its most significant topics. The second step is an application of those results to a larger group of films. To find out if the topics discovered at the first step are relevant, each of them must be tested with other movies of the same category. From that point, it is possible that few topics became inaccurate for all of the films, as few others emerged as important. The topics which are finally selected became series. By series, I mean different sets of similarities, the use of the same places to set the action, similar plot lines or characters, even stories with the same implicit or untold details. Though after identifying those main series, and according to Sorlin, we need to create a dialogue between the films and the society where they have been produced. So the third step is the moment where we look through the social and historical context to understand the choices made by the filmmakers about what is presented in their movies. The concept of representation, as developed by Stuart Hall in Representation, Cultural Representations, and Signifying Practices, is another important methodological source. As Hall affirms that the representation is the production of the meaning through language, in our specific case, the meaning will be the series I just talked about. The language will be the cinema